A warm welcome to both our guests. Thank you so much for joining us on the AM Report this morning. Hope, I want to start with you. Slam poetry, there's something distinct about it, isn't it? There's something different about it to other forms of poetry.
Yeah.
What would you say that is?
I would say the difference, first of all, thank you for having me. So slam poetry, the difference between it and I think other forms of poetry, I would say that in slam you are competing with other poets. So you get on stage, everybody comes, you have a specific time that's given to you as an artist, as a poet, and you're basically being judged. You get judged, you perform, everybody else comes and performs, and then you get judged based off whatever your performance was.
Right,
yeah.
right. So the sense I get is that there's a lot of audience engagement.
Yeah, it's a competitive space. Yeah.
Well, Xabiso, as someone who's been crowned in the world of slam poetry, talk to us about your love for it. I mean, what drew you to slam poetry? There's a lot of influences in it, orally, as well as the fact that it's spoken word. What drew you to slam poetry in the first place?
I think for me it was definitely a space to help hone the different techniques of poetry. When I was coming up in the slam space in Joburg, we really, we emphasized each other's writing, we emphasized improving each other's performance. So it was really a full, holistic, almost experience of improving the performer, of improving the writer. And so that was really something that drew me to it, and as well as the community that kind of almost held that space of improvement.
Talking about community, Hope, we know that, social activism is often featured in slam poetry spaces. Yeah. Xabiso talks about community. It often feels as though it's a safe space where people can vocalize issues that are often hard to, contemplate in society, that form part of conversations that are very difficult to have, but you have that space, you have that community, and it's this artistic form. Talk to us about that element of social activism that we often see in slam poetry.
Right, absolutely. So, I mean, I think it has to do with, first of all, I suppose, understanding your role as an artist, before I suppose you're even a poet. Just the fact that you're an artist, There's great importance in speaking to issues that are affecting society, affecting, just the world in general. Like, you want to talk about things that people can resonate with, and these are usually issues that are like sort of burning in society. So it becomes a good platform to then address these issues in an artistic sort of sense. And I think slam poetry is a good sort of platform and way to do that. Yeah, because a lot of people are drawn in, especially young people. So it's like, what is a cool way, if I can put it that way, to get younger people involved in banning issues in society. And I think poetry is definitely one of the most amazing ways you can bring people, young people specifically, talking about these issues that are affecting our world.
Yeah. Xabiso, so you have traveled the world performing your pieces of poetry. What sort of issues are you most commonly drawn to, or at least to feel that need to form part of that larger conversation?
I think something that I saw recently was just speaking to about the fact that you kind of need to write to your soul, or write the thing that burns most at your heart. So for me, I would, offer and suggest to everybody that's writing to write about issues that are closest to them. And for me, that would be things around, turning toxic masculinity into compassionate masculinity. It would be things around equality and equity. It would be things around mental health and how to how to dig deeper into ourselves and to begin to make sense of the world around us. I think that's the beauty of poetry, that's the beauty of spoken word, that's the beauty of slam, that it allows us these kind of excavate ourselves and to excavate the world around us to begin to make sense of it.
Yeah, Hope, you mentioned earlier this cross-generational element that exists within spoken word poetry or slam poetry. And I had a very interesting conversation with, a niece of mine around depression, mental health disorders, anxieties. And she said that the difference she feels between her generation, which is a much younger cohort, and myself, is that, they seem to have the language for it in a way that perhaps older generations haven't been able to enjoy. What about poetry, slam poetry, facilitates those conversations, gives children or younger generations that language to speak on those issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would sort of try to link it with what I was already saying about how it is like poetry sort of engages better to younger people, because it's something they sort of look at and say that, it's cool. It's like rap music or something like that. Like if you're into something like that, you already have this sort of disposition of poetry is cool, so you're sort of paying more attention than maybe you would if you were like sort of just watching the news, because it comes in differently. And I think the language around poetry or around anything that's sort of art-related, it sort of hits better with younger people. And I think, which is why it's such a cool way to draw people in, because it draws them in because they're already interested in the art form in itself. So if you can draw them in with the art form, then you're able to then, okay, you're already here, you're listening, you're paying attention. Here's some of the issues that we can address around mental health, as Xabiso was saying, around GBV or any other issues that we're facing, because then younger people are like listening in, and, it sort of becomes easier to have everybody sort of engaging in that.
No, absolutely. Yeah. But I mean, the heart of this conversation is the future of poetry as a form of entertainment in this country. A concern across for many is, South Africa's literacy rates. Language, being able to read and comprehend what you're reading, forms a large part of being able to communicate what's happening on the inside, what's happening around you. Xabiso, when you look at South Africa's, status quo and the fact that so many of our children suffer from illiteracy, suffer from a lack of comprehension skills, what are your thoughts on that, and perhaps your concerns and fears around the future of poetry as an art form?
I think that poetry, spoken word is an art form that's always going to be around, and I think one of the reasons for that is that the pen is one of the easiest ways to access art, the pen and the page. If you look at like other art forms from acting to illustration, there's so much more of kind of a barrier of entry, whereas everybody kind of has access to a page, to a pen. I also believe that poetry is one of those mediums that can be used to address literacy, I think when thinking around poetry and thinking around the future of poetry and the future of literacy, we need to kind of be expansive in the way we think, that it isn't just a form that you use to get up on stage and speak fire into certain issues, but it can also be used as a tool for transformation. It can also be used as a tool for
all right, we appear to have
power sorry about that. So yeah, as I was saying, that poetry can also then be used as a tool for transformation, can be used as a tool for healing, and we can really start to access marginalized groups within South Africa to improve literacy, to delve and dig deeper into various issues, and it just comes with expanding our concept and our idea around what poetry is and what it can do.
Right. Well, our fellow panelists, Xabiso, believes that slam poetry can be used as a tool for transformation, and perhaps therein lies the future of poetry for South Africa in the entertainment industry. What are your thoughts on that when you think about the future of the entertainment industry? Where's the space that poetry can occupy fully and expansively?
Right. I would say poetry deserves to be in all the spaces, and I think about it usually in contrast to music or musicians, and I think about all, the spaces where music is allowed to sort of to be in or exist, the platforms rather, and I feel like if we can get poetry to be in the same platforms and exist in the same platforms as musicians or music, I feel like that's a good start, because I feel like for a long time, poetry in itself is sort of undermined and sort of, it's not really taken with the same seriousness as other art forms. And I feel like the thing we're supposed to be doing is recognize that poetry is as important as all these other art forms. And once we recognize that, then move forward to saying, if we're saying it's as important, then we should also be putting it in the same sort of pedicle, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, and plowing into it.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you to both our guests for joining us today and helping us to have this conversation.